Welcome to the iPad Podcast, a weekly podcast from Mac's Future.
Okay, hey, it's the iPad Podcast by Lex at Mac's Future. And this is episode 91, and we're on the eve of the iPad 3 launch this Wednesday, March 7th. Hey, and by the way, I skipped last week because I was on vacation in Hawaii. So sorry about that. I should have put some notice up, but I try to do a weekly podcast about the iPad as well as the Apple podcast that I have, which comes out usually on Saturday or Friday night, and this one comes out usually Sunday or Monday. So this is iPad podcast number 91 by Lex at the Mac'sFuture.com website. Remember, this is a chit-chat-free podcast about all things iPad. You can help it out by giving it any sort of positive review on the iTunes in the iTunes store, or go to YouTube or Blip TV. There's a video version of this, and you can give it any sort of positive stuff there too. That would be helpful. This is commercial free. At least the audio version of this is commercial free. I have some like YouTube type commercials like that overlay on the video version of this. Anyways, thanks for listening, and let's get to a whole bunch of iPad news. Okay, so by now it's pretty much well known that Apple's having a major event at the Ubergizmo Center for the Arts in San Francisco this Wednesday, March 7th, 2012 at 10 a.m. Pacific time, so that's 1 p.m. on the East Coast. And it's pretty much known that this is going to happen. The Loop, Insight.com, also known as The Loop, which is pretty much hooked into stuff regarding Apple, posted the invitation they got, as well as other journalists got, to this event. And now Apple, Apple doesn't tell you ahead of time exactly what the event is. People show up just because it's Apple. And the invitation, if you're looking at the video version of this, says, is a picture of a finger on it, like an iPad icon of the calendar. And next to it is a keynote icon and a Maps icon. And it says, all it says is, we have something you really have to see, period, and touch. So people are speculating, what does that mean? They're trying to read. It's almost like Kremlinology, the study of the Soviet Union back when it was run by the hardcore communists. Where people try to decipher exactly what does this mean, what does that mean. And so some people are trying to decipher, what does it mean that this picture of the finger on the icon of the calendar. This picture doesn't show the home button, but it could be that somebody's holding this iPad in landscape mode. So some people are like, aha, there's no home button, so this must mean that the next iPad 3 has no home button. Other people are saying, aha, why are they showing the Maps icon? The Maps icon maybe has something's going to be changed. Maybe they're using a different map provider instead of Google. Maybe they're using somebody else. Same with Keynote. I don't think it means anything, frankly, to tell you the truth. I think the finger's on the calendar and it says Wednesday the 7th. That's all it means. These are standard icons on the iPad and all that it means. But look, it's going to be definitely a new iPad, because it's about the time that the iPad 2 came out last year. And so Apple's due for an upgrade, and it's going to be the iPad 3. So, I'm sure it's going to be the iPad 3, and it may be other things too. Okay, so what will be in the iPad 3? And if you're looking at the video version of this, I'm just looking at Apple's iPad page, which is still all about the iPad 2. So what will be in the iPad 3? Well, there's been a lot of rumors. It's going to have this, it's going to have that. Here's what I'm pretty sure it's going to have. It's definitely going to have a high-resolution screen, much higher than the current screen. It's basically going to double the vertical and the horizontal. So looking at the tech specs of the current iPad in terms of pixels, let's see, the display currently is 1024 by 768. So they're going to double that. So it's going to be 2048 by 1500 and change. So doubling the y-axis and the x-axis actually quadruples the pixels per square inch. So it's gonna be a much better screen. It's going to be very intense. It's going to be very high definition. And I think that's going to be, I think, the most stunning part about the iPad 3. Now, the other thing that I'm sure is going to happen is that it's going to have both a faster processor and a faster video card. Now, some people have been debating, well, what does that mean? Is it going to be currently there's an A5 chip in the iPad 2, and is it going to be an A6 chip? And some people are saying, no, it's going to be an A5S chip. Frankly, I don't care what they call it, and Apple doesn't really care what they call it. The question is it going to be faster? And, some people are like, is it going to be a quad-core processors, or is it going to be dual-core like the current one? Again, I don't think it makes a difference. Apple's just going to make it more powerful, and they could make it more powerful by raising the clock speed of the dual-core processor. I think right now Apple doesn't publish it, but I think it's a little under 1 gigahertz. Apple could find a way to increase the clock speed, make it 1.5 gigahertz or 1.25 gigahertz. And similarly, Apple could go to a quad-core processor, but having quad-core doesn't mean you're necessarily speeding things up, because you have to have applications that can take advantage of 4 processors running at the same time. Some applications can't. My prediction is it's going to be a dual-core processor with faster clock speeds. Now, the video processor was also significantly faster in the iPad 2 compared to the iPad 1. So I predict that will also be more powerful, in particular because it has to be, because there's going to be more pixels on the screen. It's going to be this Retina display screen, and so you're going to have a faster video processor to render that, the screen video, the screen, pixels. So we're probably going to have faster that. And I wouldn't be surprised if the RAM, the dedicated RAM, got upgraded. I think currently it's like, 512 megabytes or something like that. I remember when we went from the iPad 1 to the iPad 2, there wasn't a huge bump, or any bump, I think, in the RAM. I think they'll definitely go with 1 gigabyte of RAM in the iPad 3. Now, the other thing is the storage sizes. The current storage sizes come in 16 gigabyte, 32 gigabytes, and 64 gigabytes. I don't think Apple's going to offer a larger storage than 64 gigabytes. Why do I say that? I say that because flash memory prices really haven't fallen much in the last year. I've been monitoring SSD drives because I put one in my iMac, and so I go to Other World Computing to see what the prices are, and they really haven't changed in the last year. So Apple's not going to put in 128 gigabytes in here because it could raise the price of the high-end iPad. Also remember, Apple's been rolling out this iCloud feature and iMatch where you can store 25,000 music tracks on the internet, and Apple's basically telling people, don't worry about how much storage you have on your iDevice, because we're going to give you storage on the internet. And that's where you should put your stuff, so then you can have it handy for all your Macs or iDevices. Now, the other thing I think what we are going to see, though, is there is a good chance, and I say this is 50-50, that Apple's going to offer a cell phone data modem connection that can take advantage of 4G cell phone data. Now, none of Apple's products, the iPhone or the iPad, have had any 4G cell phone data connections up till now. The Android phones, some of them have had that. I think a lot of people think Apple has not gone already with the 4G modems is because the 4G modems, which, although they can have more data connection through cell phone data connection, they take up a lot of battery. They're battery and power hogs. However, some people have said, and I sort of agree with this, that if Apple's going to experiment with 4G data connection, it's going to do so first with the iPad, which has a massive battery. The battery on the iPad is fantastic. You can go like 10, 11 hours of using the iPad without having to recharge it. So it could be that Apple is going to put this next generation 4G, also known as LTE, cell phone data connection in the iPad 3. Maybe it's more than 50-50. Maybe it's a 75% chance it's going to happen. I don't think you're going to see any change in this model regarding the connectivity ports. I think all you're going to have is this proprietary 30-pin USB dock connection in the bottom. Apple's into simplicity. That and the audio jack out are the only thing. Some people speculate that Apple will put Thunderbolt connection, which is that high-speed data connection, into the iPad. It's in the Mac products. And my thinking on that is that Apple may not do that yet because there really aren't a lot of Thunderbolt products out there to work with the iPad. On the other hand, if they do have a Thunderbolt connection, then it would sort of force a lot of people to upgrade to a newer Macintosh. But remember, the iPad also works with Windows computers, and most people have USB connections. I guess they could sell a cable. I haven't seen such a cable that's like Thunderbolt to USB. So people who don't have Thunderbolt connection on their computer could connect via a USB to Thunderbolt connection to the iPad. But my guess is that Thunderbolt is not mature yet. There's not a lot of products that will work with an iPad with Thunderbolt. On the other hand, if you had a Thunderbolt connection on the iPad and it was connected to a Mac, the data transfers between the two would be incredibly, incredibly fast. So, I don't know. I'm changing my mind as I say this. Maybe there is a chance that Apple will go with Thunderbolt simply to sort of push more use in the Thunderbolt world. And I guess Apple could solve the whole Thunderbolt to USB problem by creating a cable or an adapter that's a Thunderbolt to USB cable or adapter so that people who have only USB on their computer can connect to it. So what else? What else is going to be in the iPad 3? I suspect, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be Siri in the iPad 3. Now, what is Siri? Siri is this great. Let's go to actually the screenshot. Oh, here we go. Siri Freak FIQ. The iPhone 4S has Siri right now, and Siri is basically built-in voice recognition into the iPhone 4S. It works by sending your voice dictation or voice queries to the internet, to Apple's servers, and then giving you either dictation, or Siri is sort of like a little robot in your iPhone 4S, and it talks back to you and gives you answers. And I would be shocked if Apple didn't put Siri into the iPad 3. So I think it's a given that we're going to have Siri in the iPad 3. And I also think it's very possible, since the iPhone 4S has the same processor as the iPad 2, that Apple's also going to allow Siri to work on the iPad 2. So I think we're definitely going to see Siri also. And what else? I think we're going to see content. I think Apple is going to have iTunes content deals that deliver higher definition video to iTunes. Right now, the video on iTunes, the high definition, is only 720 pixels and 720p. And I think Apple's going to now offer 1080p, which is, more full high definition video. And so you're going to have new high definition content, higher pixels of movies and TV shows. But I think Apple's also going to announce new content deals with providers, so there'll be more movies and more TV shows on iTunes. And I bet you they do it at this time when they announce the iPad 3. So that's a lot. That's like sort of a mouthful to talk about. But there's more stuff, I think. Now, what about the prices? I don't think the prices are going to change. Apple generally tries to keep the price the same. And 9to5mac.com, which is a website that tracks Apple, has information that says that it's not going to change. And they say, quote, that we've got word that iPad pricing is going to be the same across the board as the current iPad 2 models, which should be no big surprise given Apple's history. So, again, so what are the prices going to be? There's probably going to be a 16 gigabyte Wi-Fi model only. That's $499. That's the current iPad 2. There's going to be a 32 gigabyte one at $599 with only Wi-Fi. A $699 model, 64 gigabytes with only Wi-Fi. And then add $129, actually $130 to each to get a cellular modem. So the 16 gigabyte model with Wi-Fi and the cell modem will be $629. The 32 gigabyte one, $729, and the 64 gigabyte cell phone and Wi-Fi model, $829. Now, there's been a rumor, as 9to5Mac reports and other people have reported, that Apple will continue to sell the iPad 2 and will maybe come out with a one that's only 8 gigabytes in storage. So, this is the rumor mill company or website in China called DigtalTrends, or in Taiwan. And DigtalTrends said that Apple would move to a iPad 2s that have 8 gigabytes of storage, 16 gigabytes of storage, and 32. I don't know. I mean, I think they're just going to go with a cheap iPad 2 model that's 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes. I think more likely they're going to go with just a 16 gigabyte iPad 2 model. Remember when the iPhone 4S came out, they've been selling an iPhone 4 that has only 8 gigabytes. So it's possible that Apple's just going to continue to sell an iPad 2 at that cheaper price. How much cheaper? Well, let's see. Let's go to Apple's website here, and let's go to the store and see what they're currently selling. Well, they've got refurbished iPad 2s. What are they selling the refurbished at? Let's go down to their specials, refurbished iPad, and they're selling, all right, here's what they're doing. So they're selling a refurbished iPad 2 Wi-Fi with 32 gigabytes. It normally sells for $599. No, it normally sells for $599. They're selling it for $499. Look at this. So a refurbished, a first generation refurbished iPad sells for $299. And all right, so here's a refurbished iPad 2 with 16 gigabytes and Wi-Fi. It is, instead of selling for $499, is selling for $419. So they knocked off $80. And what's interesting is for the 32 gigabyte, that's with the Wi-Fi. Yeah, the 32 gigabyte with just Wi-Fi is $499. So here's the thing. I think they're going to sell, if they sell an 8 gigabyte iPad 2 with Wi-Fi only, I think they're going to sell it for $399. And I've said this before, what people have to keep in mind is that Apple is selling the iPod Touch for, I think, $200, the entry-level iPod Touch. And so they have to be kind of careful where they price a discounted iPad 2, because is it really going to be, overlapping in price with the iPod Touch? So right now the iPod Touch ranges, look at this, a 64 gigabyte Wi-Fi iPod Touch goes for $399, and an 8 gigabyte iPod Touch goes for $199. So, Apple doesn't have a lot of room. Could Apple price an iPad 2 lower than the 64 gigabyte iPod Touch? That would be kind of weird, right? I guess they could make it the same price as a 64 gigabyte iPod Touch. but have only 8 gigabytes of storage. So this is, I think, a lot of people don't talk about it, but if you think about it, the iPod Touch is like a mini iPad, right? It's an iOS device. The iPhone itself is like a tablet. It's just a really small tablet. So that's where there's tension, now. But I do think that for the just standard iPad 3, they're going to have, the same pricing as we currently have. The top model being $829. So when are they going to actually take orders or sell the iPad 3 if the event is on March 7th? Well, there's some clue here. There's a website called Geek.com that says Best Buy has iPad 3 accessories arriving on March 11th. And it says, now that we know the date that the iPad 3 will be announced March 7th, the next big question is when it will go on sale. And they say this typically happens a week to a week and a half after an Apple event. But they say one of the rumors that has come about is that a Best Buy inventory screen shows a zag shield for the iPad 3 that is set to arrive on March 11th. And the next day is Monday, March 12th. So, I don't know. It would be kind of interesting. It says here the iPhone 4S launched on Friday, 10 days after the announcement. The iPad 2 was released on a Friday as well, 9 days after its event. It says the iPhone 4 debuted on a Thursday, 17 days after it was revealed. And the iPad dropped on a Saturday over 2 months before. So, here's the thing. Why would Apple release the iPad 3 like the Friday after the March 7th announcement? Well, Apple might have financial pressure to do that, and here's why. Because the iPad's a big seller for Apple, right? So now that it's sort of been announced that the iPad 3 is coming out it's going to be announced on March 7th, obviously the sales of iPad 2s are going to slow down. Now, Apple's fiscal quarter ends at the end of March. So there's going to be a slowdown right now in the sale of iPads. And so that could affect Apple's quarterly results this quarter. I remember last year, that Apple didn't have many iPad sales or as many in this quarter as, let's say, the next, because the, iPad came out towards the end of it. So, I think that Apple maybe they got their act together and maybe they're ready to start selling it this Friday, March 9th. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. That way they would get in at least a couple of weeks in March of the sale of the iPad 3, which could help keep its quarterly numbers in terms of profits up. On the other hand, maybe logistically it's kind of hard. If you want to have that surprise on March 7th, if you've already shipped or started shipping these products to people to start selling in stores, you're going to have more leaks. So my guess is, look, it's either going to be this Monday, March 9th, or this Friday, March 9th, or a week from Friday, March 16th. That's my guess. Now, another thing that Apple may reveal on March 7th, which I think really relates to the iPad, is a new upgrade to the Apple TV. And why do I say that? Well, there have been some reports in the press that some stores that sell the Apple TV are out of Apple TVs, and there's not going to be any update, according to their websites, till March 7th, including some Apple stores. And Apple does have a need to upgrade the Apple TV, in particular because it is upgrading the iPad 3, let's say, to a higher pixel display. So you're going to have higher content. And I forgot, like another thing that Apple, I'm sure, is going to upgrade on the iPad 3 is the camera. The camera is currently a very low pixels, and people are very unhappy with the camera. I think the backside camera is like 3 megapixel. Apple is probably going to upgrade the back of the iPad camera to at least 5 megapixel, if not 8 megapixels. And what's going on is a lot of people are using the iPad to shoot video or to shoot pictures with. And given that you have this incredible, screen with the high resolution, you're going to want a good camera. Now, here's the thing. If you're taking lots of movies and pictures with your iPad and you want to use AirPlay with the Apple TV, you want to make sure that the Apple TV can run 1080p video. And remember, the iPad right now, the iPad 2, can screen mirror to the Apple TV. And I actually love this whole AirPlay thing. To me, people are like speculating as to Apple making a real TV, like with a screen that has the Apple TV built into it. And everyone's talking about how is Apple going to get content on the Apple TV. Right now, you basically have iTunes, you've got Netflix, you've got MLB, baseball, basketball, and YouTube and stuff like that. But you don't have like ABC News and all that. But you know what? And I've been saying this over and over again. If you have an iPad 2, and there is so much like video content now on the iPad 2 because companies like NBC, ABC, Al Jazeera TV, they're all putting these apps on the iPad which allow you to see streaming video from their websites. And with AirPlay, if you're in a Wi-Fi network with an Apple TV, you can just shoot the video from your Apple TV, from your iPad 2 or iPhone 4S to the Apple TV and see the movie there. And I was experimenting the other day with the NBC app, and you can get a lot of NBC shows like 30 Rock on this app. And if you use AirPlay, it's on your big screen TV through Apple TV. So look, I think they're going to upgrade the Apple TV. Currently, the Apple TV hasn't really been upgraded in a long time, and it uses the older A4 chip that the iPhone 4 has, and not the faster A5 chip that the iPad 2 has and that the iPhone 4S has. So at the very least, they'll go to an A5 chip. Maybe they'll go to the newer chip that's going to be in the iPad 3. That would be great. That would make it really powerful. But remember, the Apple TV only costs $99. And so maybe it's more expensive to go to the more recent chip. And I wouldn't be surprised if Apple dropped the price of the Apple TV from $99 to, let's say, $50 or $59, because it's in some way it's a peripheral to the iPad. I really think it is a peripheral. And one of the things, I said this on the other podcast, I really think Apple should create an Apple TV model that has a built-in Wi-Fi modem in there. A Wi-Fi hub that creates, the Wi-Fi connection. Because right now, you need a Wi-Fi router that broadcasts a Wi-Fi network to hook your iPad to the Apple TV. But imagine, I don't think it would be that hard to do if you took like what's in the guts of an Apple Express, which is a mini router. If you took the guts of an Apple Express and merged it into an Apple TV, it would still be a very small form factor, and you would kill two birds with one stone. You would allow you to have this sort of Wi-Fi network and connect to your Apple TV, but you wouldn't have to carry a second device like a router. Because in some ways, with an iPad, this AirPlay thing is amazing for business people and people giving speeches, because you could take your Apple TV and connect it to a projector or a TV at some business meeting, and then walk around the room if you had Wi-Fi network and broadcast from your iPad or iPhone 4S whatever is on the screen to the big screen TV. It's a great, in courtrooms, a lot of lawyers now do electronic exhibits and PowerPoint presentations. And imagine attorneys could sort of just bring an iPad to the podium and wirelessly broadcast to the big screen or projector via the Apple TV. But again, one of the things that's annoying is that you have to have a Wi-Fi network. So you have to bring and create your own Wi-Fi network using maybe an Apple Express or an Apple Extreme router. But Apple, if they just built into the Wi-Fi into the Apple TV, I think that would sell like hotcakes. So here, I mean, how about this crazy prediction by me? How about if Apple comes out with a really cheap Apple TV at $50 or $59 that doesn't have the Wi-Fi network modem in there, or whatever the network router, but then comes out with a $100 Apple TV that has the router in it. I think those will sell like crazy. So I think we're going to see something involving the Apple TV on March 7th. I think we're going to definitely see an upgrade in processor power, but I'm praying for, you're hearing it here, I'm praying for them putting a Wi-Fi router into the Apple TV. If you're listening to me, Apple, please do that. Now, the other thing that Apple may preview on March 7th is the next version of the iOS operating system for the iPad and the iPhone and the iPod Touch, known as iOS. Right now, they're on iOS 5, different versions of iOS 5, and they may preview, or they may release that day, iOS 5.1, which would be the upgrade from the current iOS. But I think they may also preview the next generation iOS. It's going to have many new features, called iOS 6.0. So they may preview it, and they also may release a developer's build of iOS 6.0 on March 7th. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. I mean, right now I'm running version 5.0.1 on my iPhone 4S. So, you know, what are some of the things that we could see in iOS 6.0? I mean, I think we could see one of the features that the Windows 8 beta has for Windows developers for tablets, which is the ability for apps to share or allow themselves to share data with other apps. Right now, Apple pretty much sandboxes apps on iOS, so they can only have access to very limited things that Apple lets them have access to, like access to the Photo app on the iPhone or the iPad, or access to the Contacts app. But what Microsoft's going to be doing with tablets is allowing app developers, if they want to say, hey, other apps can share and have access to some of the data we have in this app. So that could lead to very creative things, but it also could lead to abuse. And, you know, Apple has to balance, you know, freedom with freedom can also be, you know, openness and freedom and laissez-faire on an operating system can also lead to Trojans and things that abuse the user or the customer. So anyways, I do think Ars Technica also was the one who really reported that they saw browser user agent strings appearing on their websites, appearing as iPads running iOS 6.0. They said that it was showing up on their server logs. And there's also a report, according to this MacRumors site, that there were a separate observation of a 2048 times 1536 screen resolution showing up in Google Analytics. So, you know, these are signs that, you know, there may be an iOS 6 coming out very soon. Now, Apple's been incredibly successful with the iPad, and we're seeing them everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And I'll tell you, like when I went on this vacation recently, I had to travel through the Los Angeles airport. I traveled on Delta, and at one point I was at the gate, we're waiting for the connection, and I went to the bathroom, and I went to the bathroom on the other side of the gate floor. And I came across gates that were filled with these embedded iPads that were all over the airport. And they were embedded, and passengers who were waiting until their plane left were using them. Now, I couldn't tell if they were using them for free or they had to pay for them. To me, it looked like they were using them for free. And they were sort of anchored and embedded in, like, so that you couldn't take them away, but you could use them. And, again, we're seeing the iPad everywhere. And when I was on this flight, at one point before takeoff, I think it was the pilot, walked back to, was walking by the seats, and he was carrying an iPad. And I said to him, "Are you using that iPad instead of flight manuals?" Because I had read about a lot of airlines had been doing that. And he said, yes. He said that Delta was on a pilot program, and no pun intended, but pilots were experimenting on Delta with using the iPad instead of these heavy flight manuals. Now, if you're looking at the video version of this, I'm on Techcrunch's website, and they had a story on March 1st, and apparently Square now is headed to New York City taxicabs. Now, what is Square? Square is this little dongle that you can plug into the iPhone or iPad, the audio jack, and then swipe credit cards from it. And you can create there's a nice Square app, and you can accept credit cards through your iPad, and your iPad and iPhone become sort of like a cash register. And I got my little Square thing a long time ago, and I tested it out by sort of charging myself. And they have a very decent rate. They're sort of competing with American Express, or other vendors. And it's very cool. And it's particularly cool for small businessmen, those street vendors who only take cash, because you're sort of freed up you don't need electrical connection. You can just sort of wirelessly through your data connection start accepting credit cards. So TechCrunch has a story that if you ever take a cab in New York, that almost all the cabs in New York have these embedded screens in the back seat, in the back of the driver's seat, and they sort of tell you roughly where your cab is on the map. They have these video announcements and little news clips and promoting some video show, and frankly the content is pretty limited. So apparently Square, who sells this device, and also they have there's a credit card reader. So all taxis now in New York you can pay by credit card by swiping a reader, and on the screen then selecting how much you want to pay, what kind of tip to give. Well, apparently Square pitched the New York Taxi Commission to replace the current taxi TVs and payment technologies in 50 cabs, and so the company said this past week on March 1st that the pilot program in New York City has been approved, and Square will be testing up to 30 cabs in the test. And it says here, drivers in the pilot will use a version of Square's existing software modified with new features specifically designed for taxis. And it says an iPhone will be plugged into the meter from which drivers can select tolls, view current traffic patterns, receive messages, and be able to view their trip history. So they're also going to be information regarding the trip, the current location, the running payments, and other deals. And I think there's going to be also content. It'd be great if the users could sort of use the iPad in any way they wanted to watch YouTube videos or send emails, or I don't know, do something like that. The current system it's nice. It's better than what we had before in New York, which was nothing. But it would be nice, to have sort of an embedded iPad in the back of cabs. So I'm going to take a look out for this. I think it's just an example of how the iPad is really becoming this enterprise device. Now, there was a little bit of a controversy last week in the iBookstore that Apple runs. This is something I'm looking at. It was reported in TUAW.com. And the story is from Mike Schramm, February 29th. Apple rejects iBook with links to Amazon store. So there's a famous internet guy who writes these books. His name is Seth Godin. And Seth Godin tried to publish a book through Apple's iBookstore, and it was rejected by Apple. And I guess he made a fuss about this because the book had links to Godin's books on Amazon. So in other words, if you open this iBook in Apple's iBook app, if you bought Seth Godin's book, if he was able to sell it, you could then click a link and be taken to another e-bookstore, which is Amazon's bookstore. So I don't know why people get upset about this, because you shouldn't. It's Apple's store. Apple doesn't have to make it available to other stores. Imagine if does Apple have to run ads in iBookstore that take you to competing e-bookstores? TUAW says, before anyone starts yelling about censorship, keep in mind that this is Apple's playground and it can take its ball home whenever it wants, no matter how inane the reason. But this reason seems particularly inane. Apple can't really be worried about one link in an ebook promoting a competitor's site, right? Not to mention that the book in question was a hardcover copy, and unless I'm mistaken, wasn't even sold on Apple's iBookstore anyway. So, I don't know. I mean, there are going to be limits. Apple's not going to allow links to everything. I mean, personally, it's not much of a hardship for me, because if I really want the book, if you've got an iPad, you can just quickly go to Safari and go to whatever bookstore you want to buy it. Or you can, I mean, you've got Safari basically, right? So all you have to do is cut and paste the name of Seth Godin's book and put it into Safari and buy it. I mean, Apple's point is they want to make it seamless to buy books through iBooks for iBooks, not seamless to buy iBooks for Amazon's Kindle bookstore or Amazon's hardcover bookstore. So I can see somehow some people are annoyed by it, but frankly, I think Apple's doing the right thing in terms of business. Okay, so this, Apple ran a contest in the last few days for whoever is going to be the person to download the 25 billionth app. So Apple over this Friday night hit 25 billion apps downloaded over its app store on iOS. That's the iPad and iPhone and iPod Touch. So the winner, I don't know if they've announced the winner yet, but basically whoever happened to be the person who actually downloaded that 25 billionth download would, won I think $10,000 credit. Let's see here. $10,000 worth of App Store credit. I mean, that's a nice promotion, but, the odds of getting it, it's really like winning the lottery, because I remember last year they had this similar promotion when it was 10 billion downloads. And so in 1 year, they had 15 billion downloads. But I remember basically what I did was try to download some free apps just as the counter was getting close to 25 billion. The counter was spinning pretty quickly, so it's an approximation. So I'm sure a lot of people were doing that, just downloading free apps, because there's a lot of free apps and they count as part of the rules too. So, but it just tells you how massive this iOS, iDevice business is for Apple. I mean, 25 billion with a B app downloads is pretty amazing. Okay, so according to DigtalTrends.com, in the excitement leading up to the launch of the iPad 3, a company in San Francisco that specializes in 3D and all sorts of futuristic concepts and technology did a video of a mock-up of a sort of a fake iPad 3 as they envisioned it. And basically, it's a cool video. I have a link to the DigtalTrends.com page that has this, and they have links to the YouTube video. But basically, the concept video imagines the iPad as having a screen that's edge to edge, and where the apps icons sort of pop out in sort of a 3D sort of way. And then the cool thing is you can connect these iPads that are just edge to edge all screen next to each other, and then they create like a bigger screen that can be used with each other, or you can put them together and in 3D have little soccer players play football, or football players play on top of it using hologram controls projected on a flat surface to the left and right of the tablets. So it's really futuristic. Apparently last year they did an iPhone 5 concept where the iPhone 5 would be also razor thin and also project a hologram keyboard that you would then use to type on the iPhone 5. So look, this isn't going to happen, but if these people can imagine it, it's very likely that at some point in the future we'll see this kind of technology, right? Maybe in the iPad or one of the competitors of the iPad. But look, you know, I think Apple probably takes notice of the crazy imaginative things these concept people do and will seek to incorporate it in future technology if the parts are there. Okay, so one of the crazier thing that's going on these days is this annoying lawsuit against Apple by this Chinese company. Reuters is reporting an update to what's going on. Okay, so the company, it's a Chinese company called ProView that used to have a business making some sort of computer, I guess in the 90s or whatever, but it was sort of in bankruptcy. Now this company ProView, which also had affiliated businesses or a parent company in Taiwan, Hong Kong, it owned for a long time the iPad trademark name in China as well as Hong Kong and Taiwan. Now, before Apple launched the iPad, it went around and purchased the rights to the iPad name in all the jurisdictions it knew, including China. Now, the way it did it through China is it went to a company in Taiwan that was, I guess, the parent company of the company in China and bought the trade name. And it didn't pay a lot of money because Apple didn't go and say, hey, we're Apple, we're about to launch some famous, device and call it the iPad. Why don't you sell it to us? If they did that, then there would be a shakedown. So instead, Apple created another company and called it something that had like the iPad initials, and then just said, oh, that company is purchasing the iPad name. So here's the bottom line. This crazy company is claiming that the Chinese part of the company didn't sell the iPad name, and now it's suing an American court claiming that Apple committed some sort of fraud by not saying that it was Apple when it bought the name. And first of all, I think that happens all the time. People go out and buy website names, and they don't do it in a name of like a multi-billion-dollar company because otherwise they're going to be shaken down, But anyways, what happened was this ProView company in one of the smaller cities had scored a victory against Apple and had been trying to get local cities to stop selling iPads. Now in Hong Kong, Apple scored a victory against this little company in the Hong Kong court. Hong Kong's part of China, but has somewhat of a separate judicial system. The Hong Kong court said, no, there's no basis. You sold the trademark name. So Apple's appealing the lower court loss in favor of the ProView to the higher people's court of Guangzhou. So I don't know how high in China's legal system that is. It says here the verdict of the higher court, which is not expected immediately, is usually final under Chinese law and will set a precedent for other cases in lower courts around China. It says here, theoretically, there is a final appeal to the Supreme People's Court to apply for a retrial, but the success rate of such applications is extremely low. So it says here, look, Apple's probably going to have to reach a settlement with ProView if they lose. Now, I don't know how much a settlement would cost. I'm sure ProView, which sounds like it's somewhat a bankrupt or near bankruptcy company, is going to try to hold them up for a lot of money. I think Apple originally paid something like $80,000 for the trade name. So, at worst, they're going to ask for billions of dollars. Now, Apple has $100 billion, so paying out $2 billion or $1 billion to this Chinese company isn't going to really make a dent. But I don't think Apple likes this precedent. I mean, to me, it's meritless. I mean, it was part of the company that sold it. They concede that the Taiwanese and the Hong Kong iPad names were sold, and the person who was selling it represented he was on behalf of all of them. And there's nothing wrong with Apple creating another company to buy the name. You're selling it. You don't have a right to know exactly who's buying it. The question is how valuable it is at the time, and are you willing to sell it? And they were willing to sell it for a mere $80,000. So we'll have to see what happens. Okay, so here's a story about how the iPad's actually saving a person's life. TUAW.com had this story. Basically, there was a guy who he was, I guess, at a cycling club, and he started getting intense pressure in his arm. He's a 48-year-old guy named Andy McMonagle, and he was working out with his cycling club, and apparently had a history of heart trouble. So he immediately went to the locker room and asked a man to help. That man was a Mayo Clinic internal medicine resident named Dr. Daniel Luders, who stayed by the side of McMonagle and yelled loudly for assistance. Then two other Mayo doctor residents who were literally around the corner came by, two brothers, and when they arrived, Dr. Luders reached out of his backpack and pulled out his iPad. And within seconds, they were able to connect through the iPad to Mayo's electronic medical record system, where he was able to pull up McMonagle's medical history. So apparently the Mayo Clinic, this major hospital, is using iPads, is giving doctors the ability to connect through an app to the medical histories and records of patients at Mayo Clinic. But this was key. This was key according to the story, because right there through the iPad, they were able to get this guy's history, and it showed that he had a heart stent installed after a previous heart attack 4 years ago. And this made the physician suspect that he was suffering from a blockage in the stent. So basically, the point of the article is they were able to immediately start acting and giving him assistance based on their diagnosis. It says here the physicians made a choice based on the EKG records that probably saved McMonagle's life. Rather than wait upwards of 3 hours to run a blood test to verify the clotting, the doctors rushed McMonagle to the cardiac catheterization lab, where a team, alerted by activating an emergency code, was waiting. They removed the clot from his artery, which was about 90% blocked. So, look, it's not just fun and games with these devices. They have real use in settings like hospitals and for doctors. And imagine we get to a point where all of us can access all of our medical records via the iPad or iPhone. Like, we'll have them right there. Imagine how easy it'll be to go to a new doctor and say, hey, do you got this app? And I've got it on my iPad, and I'll send you access to my medical history. And then we'll have access all the time. I find it really annoying that, to get test results, it's like pulling teeth to get them from, diagnostic labs or from the doctors or the hospitals. I mean, I would like to have control over my medical record and the medical record of my family. So I think devices like the iPad are going to be critical for stuff like that. And it's a really nice story. Okay, let's get to some apps for the iPad. So Flipboard, which is I think one of my favorite apps for the iPad, got upgraded, and it got a major upgrade. Now Flipboard is basically this app that takes news feeds and turns it into this beautiful magazine which you can flip through. And now it's been updated. Here are the new things in version 1.8. Cover stories come to the iPad edition. So now it'll push like interesting Flipboard cover stories on the front page. That was only on Flipboard and the iPhone up till now. There's a third page of tiles for all of your favorite content. There's a new full screen images and typography make for even more beautiful layouts. And you can pick topics of interest when first using Flipboard. instantly setting up your Flipboard with great stuff to read. There's international content guides with hundreds of recommendations for readers in the UK and Ireland, Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. So it's pretty cool. Let's go to it. Let me show you what it looks like. I just upgraded it just the other day. So, like, look, this is what you get now. You get this beautiful screen. It shows you like a nice picture of mountains, and you flip it, and you've got cover stories here. Cover stories, My Modern Metropolis. You can just flip it, and there are your cover stories. But you can go back, and it's just going to sort of flip through different cover stories. It gives you interesting content that you didn't even think about. For example, now it's saying TED 2012, 10 innovations that could help shape a better world. And so it's sort of, if you don't know what to read, the cover stories I think is a great idea. They're essentially curating better cover stories to read. But the beauty of Flipboard is you can have it work with your, your content. You can put your Twitter feed into Flipboard. You could put your Facebook feed into Flipboard. But you basically get these tiles, and you can see a lot of content. That's your own content or content from the internet. So it's pretty cool. I really like it. It's a free app. I think it's one of the best iPad apps. So you should, if you don't have Flipboard, you should probably get it if you have an iPad. Okay, so the other app that you might want to check out that got a lot of splash recently is the OnLive Desktop app. And this does something pretty remarkable, and it's free. If you want more features to it, you have to pay for an upgrade, but it's free, and this is what it does. You create an account, and through the connection to the internet, it gives you windows on your iPad, and it gives you for free a Safari browser. Windows Explorer browser that can play Flash, as well as Microsoft Word, and also Adobe Reader, Microsoft Excel, and Microsoft PowerPoint. Now, if you want other Microsoft stuff like Outlook and other Windows stuff, you have to pay like a monthly fee. So it's pretty cool. It's free. Now let's take a look at it. Okay, so here is a screenshot of screen capture of my iPad running OnLive Desktop. Now, I'll tell you, I think it's very clever that they did this. It's a way to sort of have a Windows on your iPad through the internet. So this is all through an internet connection. Right now I'm on Wi-Fi. But I got to tell you, on cell phone data connection through AT&T, it was really slow. And even with this Wi-Fi, I have a high-speed Wi-Fi connection. It's not like zippy fast. So here I've launched, the Windows Explorer. Let me go to YouTube, and there's here's what happens if you want to use a keyboard. Like I highlighted the address bar of the browser. I'll do it again, and a little keyboard pops up, and you press it, and you get a different keyboard. And the keyboard is not like the iPad keyboard. It's an internet-based keyboard. And let's see, I'm going to type U. See, with the iPad, you get the little letters pop up, so it's kind of easier to type. So I made a typo, and there's a little bit of a lag because you're going over the internet. And I've got pretty fast connection to the internet here. We can run a speed test. See, and I'm mistyping here. YouTube.com. And then how do you press return? There we go. So here I'm going to YouTube, and it's kind of slow. See, I mean, it's taken a long time for the browser to get to YouTube. See, it's still rendering. So look, it's a great concept, but it's just not fast enough for me. This would drive me crazy. Now it says here, sorry, but OnLive Desktop Standard. Oh, I see. If you want to browse the internet, you have to go to the paid version of OnLive Desktop. So that kind of stinks. So let's go to just, PowerPoint. Let's launch PowerPoint. And I'll tell you though, I mean, it's a clever concept, but I would only get this if you're like hyper desperate to run Windows on your iPad. So here's a PowerPoint. Let's create a title. See, again, it's not like where's the key? Where's the keyboard? Oh, you got to press at the bottom to add the keyboard, and then it shrinks the slide up. You see, the slide is now really small. This is not very elegant. So I'm going to write test slide. So it's kind of slow. Let's see if we can now add some shapes to the PowerPoint. Test slide, shapes, and you get a zillion shapes. Now the problem with this is it's just not an ideal interface for the iPad. These little shapes are way too small. So I'm going to take like a triangle and drag it. And did anything happen? Nothing happened. Let's go with the shapes again. I'm going to take a square, let's say, and drag it. Oh, there we go. I don't know. This is way, it's way too buggy. I mean, the speed is just not right there. I mean, it's a great concept. A lot of people have gone gaga over this on the internet. To me, it's kind of useless. It's too slow. Personally, I think Microsoft is going to release the standard Microsoft Office apps for the iPad. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out on March 7th. I wouldn't be surprised if Apple brings Microsoft on stage and they announce that they have Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, and Microsoft Excel for the iPad. But this is a clever concept. It's basically doing this through the internet, and it's giving you this sort of virtual top. Let me see if I can get speed test. Now, I did this Windows, here's speed test, and no, it's upside down, but let's look at this. I'm getting 12 megabytes per second download. So that's a fast internet connection. So there's no reason it should have been so buggy. So anyways, you can get it. I play around with the free version of this OnLive thing, but I wouldn't pay for the paid version unless you desperately need right now some sort of Windows stuff. But again, I expect Microsoft to come out with Office very soon. So another app that's gotten a lot of news this past week is something that Adobe released. Now, Adobe has had Photoshop Express on the iPad and iPhone for a long time, and that's a great app, and it's free. But they released a $10 or $9.99 app called Adobe Photoshop Touch, and it appears to be very powerful, very, very powerful. You can do layers, you can do all sorts of incredible effects. Now, but before I go into all the incredible things that you can do with it, there's one big problem with it, and that's why I didn't pay the $10 to get it. The maximum resolution that it can handle is 1600 by 1600 pixels. Now that's fine. That's fine if you're using a picture that you've taken through the iPad 2's camera, because the iPad 2's camera is pretty low resolution. However, here's the problem. A lot of people have like the newer iPhones, particularly the iPhone 4S, and I often transfer, if I'm going to edit photos and I'm on the road and I have my iPad, most likely I'm going to have my iPhone 4S. So the place that I'm going to want to really edit photos is going to be when I'm on the road, or if the iPad is my only computer. But most people who have the iPad as their only computer are probably going to have a camera or an iPhone 4S that has a much higher maximum image resolution than 1600 by 1600. So a lot of the comments complain about this limit because they're saying that it won't even let you use any photo that has a higher pixel. I mean, the app could theoretically, if somebody programmed it that way, convert the higher resolution pictures to 1600 by 1600, but it doesn't do that. So this really bugs a lot of people. So it's very powerful. Now apparently it can do things such as layers, selection tools, adjustments, and filters to create what it says are mind-blowing images. And it says here you can use your iPad camera to fill an area on a layer with the unique camera fill feature. You can select part of an image to extract by scribbling with the scribble selection tool. With Refine Edge, use your fingertips to capture even hard to select image elements like hair and ease. It says you can search and acquire images with the integrated Google image search. You can share images on Facebook and view comments right within the app. And, other features. It has printing. But the problem is it's only 1600 by 1600. And people are not happy with that. Let's take a look at it in iTunes. I'll show you some of the comments. So here are some of the comments. All right. Let's see. Here's one comment. All the features that make sense on a tablet are here. The biggest limitation, I'm just looking at the first comment, is file size. 16 by 1600 is very small, so anything over about 2.5 megapixel won't even import. The app should at least import the image and crunch its size for you. So many images on my iPad, I'd love to edit, but just can't. The next person says, okay, but needs work. The interface and overall app experience is great and optimized for touch on a tablet. Lack of Dropbox support in maximum resolution of images set to only 1600 by 1600 is a deal breaker for me. PhotoForge may work better for those like me that need to work with larger images. And really, what's going to happen when the iPad 3 comes? Because you got to expect that the iPad 3 is going to have a much better camera than the iPad 2. Some people think that Adobe will upgrade this app maybe on March 7th when the iPad 3 comes out with possibly a better camera. But look, at this point, I can't recommend this app, and I'm not going to buy it for $9.99, $10, unless Adobe upgrades it so that it can work with much higher resolution pictures. Okay, so that's it for the iPad Podcast, episode 91. This is Lex at maxfuture.com. It's going to be a very intense week in iPad world coming up this coming week. So stay tuned. I might do something special on March 7th to discuss the iPad 3. This is a chit-chat-free podcast. Your support in iTunes would be greatly appreciated. Please check out the video version of this on YouTube or on Blip TV, and take care.
This has been a Max Future production.